Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to build a partnership from the ground up. But we're not talking about simple handshakes here. We're talking about the full force of the law. So let's get right into it.
So here's our blueprint. First, we'll define what a partnership actually is in the eyes of the law. Then we're going to tackle its kind of strange identity crisis. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty rules for every partner, see how it stacks up against a joint venture, and finally, we'll talk about the one thing that holds it all together. You know the story, right? It's a classic. Two friends, one awesome idea, and a quick handshake to seal the deal. But you gotta be careful, because what feels like just a casual team-up could actually be seen by the law as a formal, legally binding partnership.
So what is the actual legal blueprint for a partnership? Let's break that down.
To get the official recipe, we have to look to this really important case in South African law, Pazzuto versus Dreyer. Now, the definition that came out of this case isn't just some vague guideline. It is the definitive test. It breaks a partnership down into 4 essential ingredients.
Let's just run through them real quick. First up, you need a contract. And get this, it can even be a verbal one. Second, every single partner has to make a contribution. Third, the business has to benefit everyone involved jointly. And number 4, the main reason you're doing all this has to be to make a profit. If your business venture checks all 4 of these boxes, well, you've probably formed a legal partnership, whether you wrote anything down or not.
Okay, now for a real legal puzzle. Is a partnership its own thing, a single entity, or is it just a collection of the people involved? This identity crisis has some pretty huge consequences.
So in South African law, the default setting, you could say, is the aggregate theory. What this means is the law basically looks right through the business name and only sees the individual partners. It doesn't really recognize the awesome company, it just sees the people who make it up. The other way of looking at it, the entity theory, which treats the business as its own separate person, well, that's not the default here.
But you know how it is with the law, there's always a twist, right? There is one very specific and very important situation where the law suddenly flips the script and treats the partnership like its own separate thing.
And this is where that exception kicks in. When a business can't pay its bills and is facing insolvency, the Insolvency Act comes into play. And it says the partnership's money and assets are totally separate from the partner's personal finances. So in this one high-stakes situation, the law all of a sudden sees the partnership as its own legal entity.
All right, so what does it actually mean to be a partner day-to-day? Well, it's really a balance of rights and duties, what you get versus what you owe.
On the one hand, you've got your rights. You have a right to a share of the profits, a right to have a say in how things are run, a right to compensation, and you can look at the books anytime. Plus, if the whole thing dissolves, you get your piece of the assets.
But on the other side of that coin are your duties. You absolutely have to make the contribution you promised. You have to share in the losses just like you share in the profits. You have to be transparent about everything. And this is the big one, you have to act in good faith.
This whole idea boils down to a core legal principle called uberrima fide. It's Latin, and it means utmost good faith. See, a partnership is way more than just a simple contract. It's a fiduciary relationship. And that's a legal term that means it's held to a much higher standard. It demands absolute loyalty and trust. You are legally required to act in the partnership's best interest, not just your own.
So you might be wondering, how is a partnership different from a joint venture? They sound pretty similar, but in the eyes of the law, trust me, they are completely different animals.
This chart lays it out pretty clearly. In a partnership, liability is joint. That means everyone is on the hook for everything. But in a joint venture, it's usually individual. And here's a massive difference. Who can even be in it? A traditional partnership is for actual people, while the joint venture can easily have companies, what the law calls juristic persons, as participants.
We've covered the definition, the legal theories, the rules, the comparisons, a lot of ground. So what's the one thing, the most important idea you should take away from all of this?
If you remember just one thing, let it be this. Everything we've talked about really comes down to trust. A partnership isn't just a way to structure a business. It's a legally recognized relationship, where the law itself demands the absolute highest standard of loyalty and good faith.
At the end of the day, the law can give you the blueprint, the rights, and the duties. But it can't force good faith. It can only set the standard. A partnership's success really rests on the integrity of the people in it. So the final question is really for you. Who would you trust enough to be your partner?